I canceled our wedding after my fiancé used our wedding fund to buy a $100,000 Porsche, then I uncovered his hidden debt and months of lies. I honestly don't know if I'm overreacting or if I'm right to feel upset, so I figured I'd lay it all out and get an outside opinion. Jake and I have been together for 5 years. We've shared an apartment for 3, and we've been engaged for almost 2. We're both just weeks away from finishing our master's degrees. I'm wrapping up in computer science, specializing in data engineering, and Jake's about to get his MBA. Our relationship has grown a lot over the years. We've gone through plenty together, the usual struggles, growing pains, and life changes. I always thought we were aligned when it came to our future. We talked about goals, made plans, and supported each other. Back when we first met in undergrad, we were both broke. Like, surviving on instant noodles broke. Jake had some help from his middle-class family, they pitched in when they could. I wasn't so lucky. My parents split during my second year of college, and both of them were dealing with financial issues of their own. I learned quickly how to take care of myself. I juggled part-time jobs all through school, managed to keep my debt low, and graduated with barely any student loans. Jake, though, had a very different approach. He'd blow through the monthly allowance his parents gave him within the first week, then spend the rest of the month struggling or borrowing from friends. I didn't think too much of it at the time, we were just kids, and it's not like I hadn't made questionable money choices too. After we finished undergrad and got engaged, we decided it made sense to combine finances, at least partially, to start preparing for married life. Since I'm naturally more organized and kind of enjoy budgeting, weird, I know, I took the lead. Jake was totally on board with that setup, admitting that financial planning wasn't really his thing, ironic, considering he's in business school. For the past 2 years, we've kept things pretty structured. We have separate personal spending accounts, but everything else is shared and planned. We've got an emergency fund to cover 6 months of expenses, retirement contributions that match what our employers offer, a savings fund for a house, another for our wedding and honeymoon, and of course a general living expenses budget for rent, groceries, utilities, the usual stuff. We each get equal personal money to spend however we want, no questions asked. We also have a joint credit card for shared purchases, which Jake is responsible for paying off monthly, while I handle the rest of the accounts and planning. One other thing, last year, I inherited about $75,000 from my grandmother after she passed. It's not a massive fortune, but it's a meaningful amount. I've kept it entirely separate from our joint finances. It's invested and earmarked for long-term goals. My grandma was a Depression-era woman, very practical and incredibly focused on financial security. She made it clear the money was meant for education, buying a home, or retirement. I plan to honor that. Jake has always been someone who burns through his personal funds quickly. He's obsessed with gaming, every new release, multiple monthly subscriptions, in-game purchases. I've watched him spend $200 in a single night on digital currency for some MMO. But it's never really bothered me. That's what our personal budgets are for, so we can each enjoy our hobbies without judgment. We've also been planning our wedding, which is set for next spring. Nothing too flashy, just a pretty ceremony at a local botanical garden with around 80 guests, and then a nice dinner reception at a restaurant nearby. The whole thing, including a 1-week honeymoon in Mexico, would cost us about $155,000. We'd already saved up roughly $112,000, and we were steadily working toward having the full amount by the end of this year. Then things took a turn. Last week, I noticed $3,500 missing from the wedding fund. That immediately raised a red flag. We've always had a hard rule not to touch that account without discussing it first. So I checked the transaction history and saw that Jake had moved the money into his personal account 3 days earlier. I didn't want to jump to conclusions or cause a scene, so I waited until Saturday morning when we were both in a good mood, just hanging out with coffee on the balcony. I brought it up gently, asking about the missing money. Without flinching, he told me he used it as a deposit on a Porsche Taycan. A new one, not even used. He pulled out his phone, all proud, showing me photos of it like it was a puppy he'd just adopted. Apparently, he'd been test driving cars for weeks without saying a word to me. I was completely blindsided. Those cars start at $90,000, and that's the base model, without any fancy extras. It's way beyond what we can reasonably afford right now. I tried to keep my cool and asked why he didn't talk to me first, especially since it involved taking money from our wedding fund. Instead of explaining, he got defensive. He told me he thought I'd be happy for him. When I reminded him that this wasn't part of our plan, any of it, he accused me of trying to control him. "It's always your plan, your goals," he said, giving me this annoyed look. "I just want something for myself for once." Here's where it gets even more frustrating. I just accepted a new job at a tech company, and it comes with a $115,000 base salary, stock options, and solid benefits. Meanwhile, Jake's still job hunting. He's turned down offers, one for $85,000, which he thought was beneath him, and another close to $100,000 that he rejected because he didn't vibe with the company's culture. With just my income, yeah, we could technically make the Porsche payments. But it would seriously delay our ability to save for a house, which has always been our shared top priority. When we graduated with our bachelor's degrees, we agreed, live cheap now, build wealth, and upgrade later. Both of us drive older, reliable cars. Mine's a 2012 Honda Civic with 120k miles, and he still drives his 2011 Toyota Camry, a hand-me-down from his parents when he started grad school. We even talked about possibly going down to one car once we move for my new job, since the area has great public transportation. It just made financial sense. What really stings is the way Jake went behind my back. He didn't just make a big purchase, he took money we saved together, for something that's supposed to be about both of us, and spent it on something that only benefits him. No heads up. No conversation. Just, gone. And when I tried to talk to him again, he doubled down. "Do you know how hard I've worked?" he said. "Don't I deserve something nice after everything we've been through?" I told him I've worked just as hard. I've stuck to the plan because it's our plan. He just rolled his eyes, called me a buzzkill under his breath, and walked off. Then the next day, I found paperwork on his desk. That's when I saw the full price, $99,750. With all the bells and whistles he added, he needed a $19,500 down payment. That explained why he took the $3,500, his personal account didn't have enough. The financing terms were awful too, a 6-year loan with $1,400 monthly payments at nearly 6% interest. I also found a credit check form, which lined up with a notification I got from our credit monitoring service a couple of days earlier. I packed a small bag and stayed with my sister for a few days, just to get some space and clear my head. Meanwhile, Jake kept blowing up my phone, one minute apologizing, the next accusing me of blowing things out of proportion. His latest message really stunned me. He said I should be grateful he hadn't asked me to use my inheritance for the car, as if that was ever even on the table. I've always been the one to take finances seriously in our relationship. But this felt like a whole different level. Jake and I have clashed before, sure, but we always managed to talk things out and meet in the middle. This time, it felt like we weren't just disagreeing, we were living in completely different realities. I started questioning if we even shared the same financial values, which, let's be real, is kind of a big deal when you're planning to marry someone. My sister didn't hesitate to weigh in. She told me straight up I should call off the engagement, saying this was a huge red flag I couldn't afford to ignore. A few friends told me I was overreacting, that it was just a car, and if we could technically afford it, why not let Jake have his fun? Even some of his friends started texting me, accusing me of being controlling and unsupportive, saying that a real partner would get behind his dreams. And that left me wondering, am I being unreasonable? Is buying a luxury car right out of grad school really that wild? More than anything, how do I get Jake to understand that this isn't just about the car, it's about what it represents? It's about making major financial decisions together, not just doing whatever you want and expecting your partner to deal with the aftermath. This whole situation had taken over my brain for days. I know I've been rambling, but thank you for sticking with me. I honestly appreciate any thoughts or advice you can offer. Update. It's been a month since I first shared this, and I wanted to come back with an update and say thank you to everyone who responded. Reading through your comments really helped me step back and look at the situation more clearly. A lot has happened since then. After 3 days at my sister's, I came back to our apartment to have the talk. I spent that time thinking carefully about what I wanted to say and how I wanted to approach things. I didn't want to start a fight, I just wanted to be clear and calm, to focus on the issue without attacking Jake personally. When we sat down, I told him I loved him and that I still wanted to build a future together, but that the Porsche situation had opened my eyes to some really serious problems in how we operate as a couple. I made it clear I wasn't mad about the idea of him wanting nice things. I was hurt because he took such a massive financial step behind my back, and used money we'd saved together for our wedding without even mentioning it. I brought up the goals we had both agreed on. I asked what had changed. That's when he dropped the next bomb. Jake admitted that he had already signed the purchase agreement for the Porsche. Not only did he use the $3,500 from our wedding fund, but he also took out a personal loan for $15,500 to cover the full down payment. The total cost of the car, with all the bells and whistles, came out to over $97,000. That meant monthly payments of around $1,400 for the next 6 years. I asked how he planned to make those payments. He just shrugged and said, "We'll figure it out. You're making good money now." Then he suggested we hold off on buying a house for a few more years and ditch the wedding plans altogether. "We can just get married at the courthouse," he said, like it was no big deal. "We don't need all that fancy stuff anyway." I was stunned. He knew how much that day meant to me. I'd spent months planning every detail, and now he was tossing it aside like it was optional. But what really got me was the way he just assumed my income would carry us through his decision. When I pointed that out, he got defensive again. He said that since we were getting married, my money was his too, and I was being selfish. Then came the inheritance again. He said I was letting it sit there for nothing when it could be used to support his dreams. I reminded him firmly that we had agreed from the beginning that the money would stay separate and be used exactly how my grandmother intended: education, a home, or retirement. He rolled his eyes and said that agreement was made before he found the car he'd always wanted. Then he added, "Your grandma would want you to be happy, and helping your husband would make you happy." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. That wasn't just manipulative, it was disrespectful to both me and the memory of the woman who helped give me a future. That night, I couldn't sleep. Jake, meanwhile, snored peacefully next to me, completely unaffected by the emotional storm he'd caused. I lay there staring at the ceiling, wondering how we had gotten so far off track. The next morning, I started digging into our finances. I combed through every account, every credit card statement, every loan. What I found was worse than I expected. Our joint credit card had been maxed out. Over $12,000 in charges, things I hadn't even known about. High-end gaming gear, expensive dinners, and multiple purchases from jewelry stores under the name L. When I confronted him about the jewelry, he said they were surprise gifts for me, except I haven't received any jewelry from him in months. His excuse didn't make sense. Then I noticed something else. For the past 5 months, Jake had only been paying the minimum on our joint card, something we'd agreed never to do. We always said we'd pay the full balance each month to avoid interest. Just the interest alone had already cost us hundreds, money that could have gone toward our house or wedding. At that point, I scheduled a meeting with a financial advisor my sister recommended. After looking over our full situation, she didn't sugarcoat it. She told me that marrying someone with such wildly different financial habits and values would likely lead to constant conflict and potentially financial disaster. She even pulled up statistics about how financial stress is one of the leading causes of divorce. At the very least, she said, if I was still considering marriage, we needed premarital financial counseling. After a lot of thinking, and after talking more with my family and close friends, I made the decision to end our engagement. It wasn't just about the car, or even the debt. It was about the dishonesty, the disregard for our shared goals, the fundamental incompatibility when it came to money and responsibility. I called off the wedding, contacted the venue and vendors, and started untangling our finances. Thankfully, most of the deposits were either refundable or could be rolled into future bookings. The venue was actually kind enough to let us transfer our deposit to my sister, who's planning an anniversary party next year. Telling Jake it was over was brutal. He went from shocked to furious to begging me not to leave. He just kept saying, "It's just money." And that, honestly, told me everything I needed to know. I found a new apartment near my job and began moving my things out. At first, Jake thought I was bluffing. He was still making plans with me in them, telling our mutual friends I'd come around. But when he realized I wasn't changing my mind, he swung back and forth between guilt trips and emotional manipulation. "You're supposed to stand by me through thick and thin," he texted one day. Then the next, "You never really loved me." When Jake told me, "If you can walk away over something as trivial as a car," I knew he still didn't get it. Untangling our lives was exhausting, mentally and emotionally. We had to shut down joint bank accounts, figure out who kept what, and split up everything from the furniture to the coffee maker. I left behind anything that felt too tied to our shared life. I just didn't want the reminders. I took only what I needed to start fresh in my new place. After Jake told his parents about the breakup, they called me. I expected them to take his side, but surprisingly, they didn't. In fact, his mom admitted something I didn't expect. They had been worried about his spending habits for years but didn't want to interfere. "He's always had issues with money," she told me. "We bailed him out multiple times in college, but after graduation, we agreed not to do it anymore. We thought he was finally growing out of it." She sounded tired, like someone who had seen the same story unfold too many times. Then his dad called me separately. He apologized for Jake's behavior and shared something I hadn't known. During undergrad, Jake maxed out 3 credit cards and racked up over $30,000 in debt. His parents paid it off, but only on the condition that he seek financial counseling. That was news to me. Jake had never once mentioned that in all our years together. Another secret. Another lie. The last few weeks have been incredibly hard. Canceling our wedding. Packing up. Starting over. There were moments when I second-guessed myself. wondering if I was making too much of this, if maybe I was walking away from 5 years over something that, on the surface, looked material. But every time I started to waver, I'd remember Jake's face when he talked about the Porsche. The way he lit up. How he cared more about that car than about what it cost us as a couple. How quickly he dismissed my concerns. How he treated my income and even my inheritance as if it belonged to him. My sister's been amazing through all of this, helping me pack, letting me crash with her when I needed a break, reminding me that I deserve a partner who respects me, not someone who makes me feel guilty for wanting shared goals. As for Jake, he's now stuck with a Porsche he can't afford. I've heard from mutual friends that he's trying to break the contract or find someone to take over the payments, but the dealership isn't making it easy. He's looking at steep penalties, and for once, his parents are standing firm. They told him it's time he dealt with the consequences of his own choices. Meanwhile, he's been posting on social media about how materialistic women don't appreciate a man with ambition and taste. Honestly, it would be funny if it weren't so frustrating. A few of our mutual friends have sided with him, saying I'm throwing away a good relationship over money. But the ones who actually know the full story? They understand this was never about just the car. Now, I'm settling into my new apartment and focusing on the future. My financial advisor helped me build a new plan, one centered around my own stability and goals, not cleaning up after someone else's impulsive mistakes. And honestly, I'm grateful to this community. The responses I got here gave me the clarity and strength to make a decision I was terrified to face. Sometimes you need that outside voice to confirm what your gut's already been whispering, that something just isn't right. The road ahead isn't going to be easy, but at least it's mine, and I know I'm heading in the right direction. Edit, additional info I forgot to include. Looking back, I realized I left out a few details that help explain how this all unfolded. Jake and I actually had a conversation about buying new cars about 6 months ago, when we were mapping out a 5-year plan. At that time, we both agreed that we'd keep driving our current cars, my 2012 Honda Civic and his 2011 Toyota Camry, for at least 2 more years after graduation. The idea was to boost our savings and avoid big expenses while getting our financial foundation set. We calculated that by living like we were still students for a couple more years, we'd be able to save enough for a 20% down payment on a modest home in our target neighborhood, have the wedding we'd been planning, and still maintain a strong emergency fund. It wasn't a plan I forced on him, it was something we discussed at length and mutually agreed to. And just to clarify, Jake had never shown any real interest in Porsches or luxury vehicles before. His sudden obsession started after one of his college friends bought a Tesla Model S. I can't prove it, but I've got a strong feeling this was more about competition than passion, especially since that friend comes from serious family money, while Jake doesn't. Edit 2, response to common questions. A lot of people have asked why I didn't notice the credit card debt sooner. The truth is, I trusted Jake. The card was in both our names, but he handled that specific account because of how we divided up our financial responsibilities. Each month, he told me the bill was paid, and I believed him. I never thought to double-check. It wasn't until I sat down to review everything that I logged in and saw the actual balance and payment history. Trust is the foundation of any relationship, and up until this point, I had no reason to question him. As for the wedding, yes, we did lose some money. About $2,200 in non-refundable deposits. And while that sucks, I honestly consider it money well spent. That small loss saved me from a much more expensive and emotionally draining mistake down the road. Some people have asked why I didn't go through with the wedding anyway, since so much had already been invested. But that's what's called the sunk cost fallacy, throwing good money after bad. Just because we'd spent time and money preparing doesn't mean I should go through with something I no longer believe in. And yes, I did suggest couples counseling before ending the engagement. I told Jake we could try working through this with a neutral third party. He shut it down immediately. Said we didn't need some stranger telling us how to live our lives. That refusal was a major red flag for me. It showed me he wasn't interested in changing or taking responsibility. For those wondering what Jake's saying now, he's telling mutual friends that I left him because I care more about money than love. Of course, he conveniently leaves out the part where he made a $97,000 decision without consulting me, took money from our wedding fund, hid credit card debt, and expected me to use my income and my inheritance to pay for his choices. Funny how being financially responsible suddenly becomes materialistic when it no longer benefits him. Some people have accused me of being controlling with money, but the truth is, Jake and I set our financial system up together. He had full access to everything. I never hid anything from him. We made major decisions jointly until this Porsche situation. He always had his own spending money, and I never monitored what he did with it. I don't think expecting honesty and mutual agreement on big purchases makes someone controlling. That's just what it means to be in a partnership.